I am PLO Lumumba here at Kibenda Tea Estate in Limuru in Kiambu County in the Republic of Kenya, continuing the discussion about Africa and her issues. And today, one of the most topical issues in the continent of Africa involves the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda. And many a commentator has said many a thing about this conflict. But it is important, even before we talk about the current situation, to understand some history, because that history is what gives context. And that history is what I characterize as the original sin. Original sin because it is the genesis of the problems that we see today. What is presently the Democratic Republic of Congo was a territory that knew freedom before King Leopold of the Belgians established what was called the Congo Free State. It is because of his activities that ultimately the European powers met in Berlin in 1884 and 1885 in order to divide Africa into spheres of influence. Before the advent of the Belgians and the Germans in that territory, African communities lived without the boundaries which were then imposed in the continent and specifically imposed in the Democratic Republic of Congo. During that period, what may be described as the Rwanda Kingdom, led by the Tutsi, was to be found in present-day Democratic Republic of Congo in the Kivu area and what is present-day Rwanda, which was then known as Rwanda Urundi. So the kingdom extended to Democratic Republic of Congo, to Rwanda, and even Urundi, and the peoples known as the Tutsi and the Hutus inhabited those areas. When the boundaries were imposed, as was the case in many African countries, some Tutsis became Congolese together with the people called the Banyamulenge, while some Tutsis became Rwandese, as indeed the Hutus with certain other communities. So when we are talking about the conflict that we know today, we must remind ourselves that there are Tutsis who are Congolese, courtesy of the Berlin boundaries, and there are some Tutsis who are Rwandese, courtesy of the Berlin activities of partition. That being the case, it is important to understand the conflict from that standpoint. When Congo regained her independence in the early 1960s, of course there were tensions, and these tensions were characterized by ethnic affiliation, so that when the first pogrom against the Tutsi took place in 1959 and there was a dispersal, the truth is that the Tutsi were displaced, but they remained, a large number of them remained in their aboriginal land in Congo, as they did in Rwanda and Burundi. When there was yet another pogrom against the Tutsis and moderate Hutus in 1994, and the current administration of Paul Kagame came into power through the Rwanda Patriotic Front, what happened is that some of the Hutus who are involved in the pogrom and were operating under the tag Interahamwe escaped into eastern Congo. And when they escaped into Eastern Congo, they formed an organization called FDLR, whose agenda is to come back to Rwanda in order to remove the Kagame administration and what they characterize as the Tutsi administration. They are in that territory. They want to come back. During that period, through successive administration, beginning with the Mobutu Sese Seko administration, both Uganda and Rwanda were involved and indeed did help Laurent Desire Kabila to remove the Mobutu regime and to install the Kabila administration in Kinshasa. After that, during the Joseph Kabila administration, the situation remained, and the Rwandese army was on a defensive posture in order to ensure that the FDLR did not invade Rwanda. The same was also true of the Ugandan army, which was also on a defensive posture because there were rebellious elements who wanted to invade Uganda. When we had in the 1990s what is called the First Congo War, it was at that time that you started having these spurts involving the organization that is now known as the M23, whose declared agenda is to protect the Tutsis from the aggression of those who say that they are not Rwandese. Their characterization as Congolese is something that has been debated over the years. In 1996, the former president of Tanzania, Julius Kambarage Nyerere, put it so very graphically. He reminded his audience that when you say that you are expelling the Tutsi from Congo, are you expelling them together with their land? And he gave an example, and in that example he said, in Kenya they are Maasais, and in Tanzania they are Maasais, and the Tanzanian Maasais are Tanzanians, and the Kenyan Maasais are Kenyans. If that then is the accepted debate, that is the context in which we must understand and see the current conflict. Rwanda has already said that our presence in DRC is on a defensive posture in order to ensure that we protect ourselves. Of course, the Western press has now made it the darn thing to say that Rwanda is assisting the M23 and is therefore destabilizing the Democratic Republic of Congo, the eastern part of it, and this has come with complete revision of their activities. Belgium has done so, the United Kingdom have done so against Rwanda. It is also instructive that what has happened is that there have been two processes which are an attempt to ensure that peace is restored. There was the original Nairobi process, which did not go very far. Then there was the Luanda process, Luanda in Angola, which was led by President João Lourenço of Angola, and the other one, of course, was led by Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta, the former president of the Republic of Kenya. There have been a number of meetings to ensure that this conflict does not continue, and those have culminated in the initial meeting which was held in Nairobi, partly physically and virtually, and which was not attended by the president of the Democratic Republic of Congo, who then attended the one that was held under SADC in Harare. After that, there was a combined meeting of SADC, which represented the Southern African states and East African community, because the Democratic Republic of Congo is both a member of SADC and a member of the East African community. It has now been decided during the Dar es Salaam meeting, which was hosted by the President of Tanzania, Samia Suluhu Hassan, that the two processes be combined. So what we now have is the Luanda-Nairobi process. And as recently as Monday, the 24th day of February, the year 2025, the two processes have appointed the following three persons to head the process of restoring peace. They are President Olusegun Obasanjo, former president of Nigeria. The next one is Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, the former president of Kenya. And the third person is Haile Mariam Desalegn, the former prime minister of Ethiopia. That triumvirate has now been mandated to midwife the peace process, and this peace process is designed to restore normalcy in the Democratic Republic of Congo. In the intervening period, in my view, it is critical that we do not apportion blame. All the parties involved must now be required to participate in the process. That means, therefore, that Rwanda must be involved. It means that the Democratic Republic of Congo must be involved. It means that Uganda must be involved to the extent that it has played a part in the past. But it is critical going forward that all the combatant parties are involved. In other words, what one expects of President Obasanjo, President Uhuru Kenyatta, and Prime Minister Desalegn is that they will persuade the Kinshasa government led by Tshisekedi Felix to convene an all-Congolese meeting at which all arms-bearing parties will be involved. And we must remind ourselves that there are over 120 armed groups in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We only hear of the M23 and the Fleuve de Congo, but there are many others, and all of them must be involved in the process, because it is only then that the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo will be able to address the short-term, medium-term, and long-term things. And if they do so, then peace and normalcy will be restored in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Peace must break out in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and all Congolese, their origin notwithstanding, must be recognized. Africa and Congo must not allow the borders crafted by the colonizers in Berlin to divide the peoples. If they do that, they'll be falling to the designs of the colonizers. The original sin was committed by the European colonizers in Berlin. We cannot afford the luxury of keeping up with that tune, which is destructive to Congo and by extension the continent of Africa. Brothers and sisters, the continent of Africa is the home of many issues. We are only scratching the surface, and will come again to continue our exercise in scratching that surface, that we may begin to understand and appreciate the mother continent. Until then, bye-bye and thank you.
The world is changing, and so is Africa's reality. Political shifts, new partnerships, and economic opportunities. And we're here to uncover why and how it's done. What do the billion-dollar IMF loans have to do with the Kenyan unrest? Are US and French troops actually withdrawing from African states after years of presence? Is Europe's so-called green agenda so green and helpful after all? Why are more and more African countries increasing trade with Russia? And how is Britain lending Africa the treasures London looted? Now, from colonial legacies and security to the future of African democracies, we break down the key challenges ahead and analyze the solutions. While the world is watching Africa, tune in with us and question more with RT International on Maisha TV Kenya.
problem number one is leadership in Africa.
What can we do for Africa? That was a wrong question. The right question was, what can we do with Africa?
What Africa do we want?
Africa had to seek first the political kingdom, and the rest would be given unto them. Unfortunately, we sought and obtained the political kingdom, but there is still a debate as to whether the rest has been given unto us.
Half of our people here are below 20 years old. Yes? Look at the average age of our presidents. It's about 63, 64 years old. We're the only continent in the world where we have presidents at 90 years old starting new terms. I mean, you guys are crazy or what?
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mushabi Jr. on your screen, bringing to you a program called Maisha Talk. This is where we build your capacity to achieve your dreams and visions. One thing I've learned in life is nobody can ever tell you that you can never be anything or achieve anything in this world. Shut them down. You can achieve anything in this world. And in this program, that is what we are talking about. Principles, attitudes, belief systems, where you are going to gain a lot. You're better off than anybody who's not going to watch this program. This is going to change your life. It's big, it's fun, it's educating, it's entertaining. Right here on Maisha Television, where you choose it, you watch it, and you definitely love it.
This keeps me going on those days when I feel like giving up. Fire.
Do not want the money or properties achieved in a corrupt way.
Badala ya kusaidia watoto wadogo wadogo katika academy za sport, wewe kazi yako imekuwa kila weekend unakuja kwa matanga kutukana viongozi. Wewe ni waziri wa michezo ama waziri wa matanga na masuala za ndani.
Sasa wewe unatuambia nini? This government is going to punish you more than they will punish me.
Tuko na mheshimiwa Eugene, tuko na mheshimiwa Lusaka na mheshimiwa Wetangula.
I have no problem. I have full confidence in the agencies that we have to do their job. People are out there bandying my brother yesterday. Me, I've said, if he's guilty, aendelee.
Lakini hata nyinyi mkuwe na mshike rada. Sasa nyinyi wakati ya kufanya kazi mnasema tafuta Ruto, lakini siku ya kupiga kura mnaniambia TV. Sasa nyinyi kweli mko na plani?
We invite you to like Maisha TV Kenya on all our online media platforms. Facebook at Maisha TV Kenya, Twitter at Maisha TV Kenya, Instagram at Maisha TV Kenya. Maisha TV now invites you to send your feedback or complain because we listen to you. You can now reach us on all our media platforms on Maisha TV Just send your messages to our social media platforms, call or text us on 0746 999 841 or send us an email to info@maishatv.co.ke. We care. We shall respond to your feedback or complaints within 14 days. Also, keep a copy of messages sent to us. We listen to you because you listen and you watch us. Maisha TV. Choose it, watch it, and love it.
This is PLO Lumumba here at the Maasai Lodge in Ongata Rongai in Kajiado District in the Rift Valley in the Republic of Kenya. And as we continue to talk about Africa, one can never quite ignore the international dimensions, given that the world is in many ways a global village. The conversation that we are engaged in is to analyze the relationship between Russia and the United States of America and its implications to the world. And of course, in the course of that discussion, we cannot help but also talk about Africa in that scenario, because Africa inescapably becomes very important as the repository not only of human resources, but specifically because of the natural resources that she has under her belly. So whenever we talk about negotiation, we must always have that history at the back of our mind. And when, therefore, the war between Russia and Ukraine started, it must be seen in the context of the collapse of the Soviet Union during the presidency of President Gorbachev. And during that period, we remember that in 1990, with the collapse of the Berlin Wall, one can vividly remember the then Secretary of the United States of America saying in the year 1990 that Russia, which was now emerging from the Soviet Union, should never fear any threat from NATO, because there will be no movement, not an inch extra towards the east. Those were the words of Secretary of State Baker. But subsequently, we started seeing something that is very interesting from Europe. The continued growth of Europe, particularly the European Union, toward the east and consuming a number of countries, and I'm using the word consuming very deliberately, and ultimately the expansion of NATO toward the east. And that is where I think Russia said under President Vladimir Putin that really you are reneging on the very undertakings that you made. You are now saying that Georgia will be a part of the European Union and possibly later a part of NATO. You are saying that Ukraine will be a part of NATO. You are saying that Latvia and Lithuania, and if possible, even Belarus, will be part of this European expansion. And therefore, you are bringing this threat to our very doorsteps. And it is because of that that there was what one may call the cause of war, the casus belli, between Ukraine and Russia. We now know that the war that is being prosecuted in Ukraine mutated. It mutated because the entire Western Europe, as we know it, started supplying Ukraine with arms. And the United States of America, during the administration of Joe Biden, almost said that we will not stop until victory is won. In fact, in the unguarded moments, they were actually admitting that the Ukrainians as a people and Ukraine as a country was merely a theater of war, but what was being fought was Russia, and that the Western world was in it. So that when this war was being prosecuted in that manner, the Europeans were agitating that it must be won in the battlefield. And Europe must always be seen post-World War in the context of the leadership of the United States of America. So that the Europeans may say their bit, but the Americans are at the very head of it, which then brings into play the relationship between the United States of America and Russia. And the Biden administration was a watershed in that relationship because it became so very toxic. And the toxicity of it can be understood in the context that during initial presidency of Donald Trump, when Donald Trump became the president of the United States of America as the 45th president, there were accusations against Russia that they had been involved and did manipulate in favor of Donald Trump. When the Biden administration came in, you can see that the relationship went south. And when the relationship went south, it did in fact affect the manner in which the war in Ukraine was being dealt with. But, and this is unique in relationships of countries, particularly when countries hold nuclear arsenal, what sometimes has been described as mutually assured destruction as a deterrent. Even during this entire period, we have seen cooperation between Russia and the United States of America in critical areas. In space, the Russian Space Center, if you may, is the meeting point, the melting point of many countries in terms of shared research. In the Arctic region, when research is being undertaken in areas that deal with climate change, the world may never know about it and they may never shout about it. There is collaboration. When there is talk about nuclear armaments and whether the Iranians are developing nuclear armaments for peaceful or for other means, the Russians may appear and may indeed be supporting the Iranians. But there is a backdoor collaboration to ensure that it does not degenerate to levels that are completely unacceptable. We also know that in the medical world, particularly during COVID-19, there may, and in fact there is suggestion there was collaboration. Collaboration, how do you develop these vaccines, whether you are talking about Moderna or you are talking about Sputnik at that time. So one sees a world which is very interesting, so that if one is a mere or casual observer, they will think that diplomacy is only conducted on the basis of gunboat diplomacy and saber rattling. But yet the reality is that there is subterranean collaboration, which in itself is in itself very important to ensure that the equilibrium is maintained. And it may not be declared, but look at the world now. If you look at the world, the United States of America still wants to consider herself as the international hegemon. So that if you look at her presence in the African continent, such as through the African Command, you'll find their presence in places such as the Seychelles, in places such as Djibouti, until very recently in the Sahel in Niger, and they have major drone bases in those areas. So that Africa remains a sphere of influence where you not only place your military arsenal, but you also get some of the material that you use to make those very arsenals when you are thinking about the utilization of artificial intelligence in warfare. Rare earth, which is to be found in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and lithium, which is to be found in places like Zimbabwe, and uranium, which is to be found in places such as Chad, Niger, and Burkina Faso. And the Russians are also not to be left out. We know that there is the Russian presence in Central African Republic. We know that there is the Russian presence in Sudan. We know that the Russians are playing a role now that the European powers and Americans are residing out of the Sahelian region. And we know, for example, that even in the security arena, they are beginning to train people in that arena. So the world is very complicated, and the complication of the world is informed by the fact, if one were to now contextualize that complication with regard to the continent of Africa. Why is it that Africa, despite their protestations to the contrary, remains an important arena or an important area for the United States of America? Why is it that Russia also has an interest in the continent of Africa? Is a number of reasons. The countries may never say it as loudly as they should, but the reality is that if one is a power militarily and economically, you want to be present in a continent which is the repository of some of the resources that you need. How do you power your industries if you don't have uranium? How do you power your industries in the 21st century when you need tantalum, when you need zinc, when you need coltan, when you need cobalt? You want to be in Niger, you want to be in Chad, you want to be in Nigeria. And that is attractive to both the United States of America and to Russia, as indeed it is attractive to China. And those are the realities that we have to grapple with going forward, which then begs the question. During the short period when one saw a very frosty relationship between the United States of America and Russia during the Biden administration, that is now thawing. No sooner had Donald Trump entered into the White House that we saw there was an immediate rapprochement between the administration in Russia as led by Vladimir Putin and Donald J. Trump in the United States of America. And once again saying, if we are going to stop the war in Ukraine, it will take Russia and the United States of America to midwife this particular process, and it is that process that we are now seeing in motion, which tells us, and this is a very post-World War II scenario, that whenever the world is facing difficulties, somehow it takes the United States of America and Russia, which is the immediate successor of the Soviet Union, to tango in order to bring normalcy to the world. Of course, Europe, as a former colonizer, will always be in the background, but post-World War II, they have always accepted the leadership of the United States of America in that regard. Russia, of course, has always been a power that speaks for itself, but in the background, one can say, there has always been the tacit support of China, which ideologically is inclined and finds Russia a lot easier to deal with. And this must also be seen as the very basis why you have BRICS, which is a counterweight in a very interesting way to the Bretton Woods institution. And once again, you see that there is that tension that is created by the emergence of BRICS, with Russia on the one side and the United States on the one side. So it is what one may characterize, if one is to be dramatic about it, as a love-hate relationship, but a necessary relationship for purposes of creating the equilibrium that the world needs, particularly when the world is truly still governed by the law of the jungle, survival of the fittest and the dying of the least suitable, and possession of military arsenal does give any country the wherewithal to make certain demands and to be respected, even if reluctantly so. That is what one may say is the tenuous relationship between Russia and the United States of America, and continents such as Africa, which are struggling to find their space, find themselves sometimes in the crossfire and confused as to who to align with. But one hopes and prays that Africa will find her footing and will no longer simply play the gooseberry in this contestation, because it is necessary for peace and tranquility in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, the issues regarding the continent of Africa and our status in the world continue to engage us. But let us say our bye-byes. We'll come back again to continue the conversation. Thank you very much.